Chapter 1739. Assassination. The PTV exploded. No, really. Sonny was stunned. Who tries to assassinate a saint with explosives? Were these people mentally challenged? The notion was so silly that, for a moment, his mind refused to register it. Everything had happened too fast for the government soldiers to react. The vehicle dissolved into a blinding flash, and a furious onslaught of flame was unleashed upon the world. A devastating shockwave also rolled out, spreading like an invisible ripple of crushing force. But of course, the saints were faster. Kai was too far away to do anything, but Sonny, Morgan, and Nephi's were not. Granted, there was not a lot that they could do in such a short amount of time. Nephi seemed to have controlled the flames to flow around Seed, her driver. The firekeeper was spared from being burned, but received the full brunt of the shockwave, staggering back as her dirty blonde hair fluttered in the wind. Of course, as a master, she would not be hurt badly, but a pained grimace still appeared on her face. Morgan, meanwhile, raised one leather-clad hand and cut the explosion apart. Sonny was pretty sure that he was not seeing things. As her hand slashed forward, both the flame and the shockwave parted in front of her, as if cut by an unseen blade. The explosion rolled past the Princess of War, leaving her entirely unscathed. Not a single blemish appeared on her stylish black suit. As for Sonny himself, he didn't do anything. That short moment was enough for him to determine that the explosion was utterly mundane, so there was no need to act. Sonny simply allowed the flame to swallow him, and for the shockwave to batter him. A second later, his onyx figure was revealed from the expanding fire, standing exactly where he had stood before. He didn't even flinch under the assault of the violent forces. But behind him, many of the government soldiers were thrown against the hulls of the armored vehicles, the vehicles themselves swaying heavily or even overturning. Screams and stunned yells filled the air. There were many wounded. Luckily, the PTV had stood apart from the military vehicles, so no one seemed to have died. But still, the explosion seemed to have hurt everyone, except for the person it was supposed to, presumably, kill. Before the shockwave even had time to dissipate, Morgan, Nephi's, and Sonny looked at each other, all sharing the same thought. It's a diversion. The explosion was simply meant to distract them when the actual attack arrived. But what? Suddenly feeling a sense of urgency, Sonny sent his shadow sense outward, spreading it across a vast area. There were countless shadows on the crowded streets of NQSC, so his mind was almost overloaded by the density of information flowing into it. Luckily, he had long learned how to filter out the useless noise, concentrating solely on potential threats. There did not seem to be anything dangerous close to them, but it took some time for his senses to stretch to their absolute limit. There, Sonny had sensed a swift shadow barreling towards them, but there was already no time to react. Before any of them could move, a strange arrow that had only become visible a split second before hitting its target revealed itself in the air, piercing through the cloud of flame caused by the explosion. It was enormous in size, almost 2 meters long, and resembled a projectile fit for a siege engine much more than it did an arrow meant to be shot from a bow. If not for the fletching on the back side of the shaft, Sonny would have mistaken it for a heavy javelin. The great arrow struck Nephi's in the chest, throwing her back like a rag doll. She flew backward and crashed into a military vehicle, deforming the alloy armor plates before falling to her knees. Sonny was already moving. He knew, of course, that something like that would not kill Changing Star of the Immortal Flame clan. To be honest, he wasn't even entirely sure what it would take to kill her, given her divine ability to heal herself, but his heart still skipped a beat, knowing that she was hurt. That arrow, what kind of arrow was it? What was its rank and class? What enchantments did it possess? Did it carry a deadly venom? did the arrowhead explode into numerous jagged shards after piercing the victim's flesh. However, in the next moment, Sonny's eyes glistened under the expressionless mask. That was because the broken pieces of the arrow dissipated into a whirlwind of sparks. Nephi's, meanwhile. Her waistcoat was torn, and so was the white blouse beneath it. What he saw in the tear was not her alabaster skin, however, but the metal rings of a chainmail shirt, bent, but unbroken. That memory. He recognized it from their time in the tomb of Ariel. Still kneeling on the ground, Nephi suddenly leaned her head to the side, and the second arrow flew past it. It pierced the heavy military vehicle, dragging it away with the force of the impact, and exploded from the other side in a rain of alloy debris. Who the hell is shooting these giant arrows? The third arrow was cut apart by Morgan, who severed it with her bare hand. However, now that Sonny's shadow sense had extended further, he could feel it. A dozen swift shadows were falling upon them like meteors, each moving with dreadful speed. 2 were aimed at him and 2 more at Morgan. 1 was heading toward Seed, but the rest were all aimed at Neff's heart. It didn't make sense, really. Considering the distance from which the mysterious archer had shot them, most of the arrows must have been in the air long before the first arrow hit, and very likely before the PTV had exploded. So, the sniper must have accounted for everything. How the 3 saints would react to the explosion, where Nephi's would be thrown back, how Sonny would move. What kind of skill was that? Was the mysterious archer a prophet? Or did the arrows possess a mind of their own, altering their paths to pursue their prey? Sonny had to deal with the strange arrows before there would be a chance to find the answer. There's not enough time. He raised a hand and simply caught one of the great arrows from the air, sliding back a few steps before its momentum dissipated. Sonny had already started to manifest countless shadows when a haunting song suddenly resounded above the silent park, drowning out all other sounds. Sound was invisible, and yet he sensed the song move past him like a ghostly river. In the next moment, the great arrows seemed to have hit a wall in the air, splintering and scattering in different directions. Looking back, Sonny saw Kai closing his mouth as he rushed toward the burning remains of the PTV. Good job, buddy. Sonny's shadow sense had already reached the limits of his perception, encompassing a vast part of NQSC. However, no matter how much he searched, he could not sense the mysterious archer. That meant one of 2 things. Either the sniper had the ability to avoid his detection, or the arrows had been shot from beyond the range of 40+ kilometers. Sonny felt a hint of chill, wondering who would have been able to shoot enchanted arrows from such a distance, and with such precision. A master, possibly with the right aspect, but quite unlikely. A saint. An echo of a high rank. Catching Kai's glance, he gestured in the direction from which the arrows had come. A split second later, his former friend, shot into the air, flying toward the possible location of the attacker. But somehow, Sonny doubted that the sniper would be caught. They must have escaped immediately after sending the arrows loose, and would be long gone by now. Looking back, he studied the scene of devastation. Broken vehicles, pieces of burning debris, dozens of wounded soldiers groaning on the ground. Nephi's was slowly rising to her feet, white flames dancing in her eyes. Morgan lowered her hand, a deep scowl replacing her usually composed expression. Seed had just landed on her back, rolled over her shoulder and jumped to her feet, hissing in pain. The whole attack had only lasted a few seconds. But the impact it had left was bound to have long-lasting consequences in the days to come. And maybe even beyond that, far in the future. Sonny had been right. The archer was long gone by the time the arrows hit. Kai flew all the way to the edges of the city, searching for the sniper with his miraculous vision, but found no trace of them. He did discover the sniper nest on the roof of a dormitory tower in the outskirts, close to 50 kilometers away from the Nightmare Gate. However, there were no clues to be found there, only a few footprints in the snow and punctured concrete where the arrows had been thrust into it for ease of access. The arrows themselves were memories and had either dissolved after being destroyed or disappeared after being dismissed. There were no functional cameras in that area of the outskirts, so no records remained to identify the attacker. The sniper, whoever it was, had disappeared like a ghost. By the time Kai returned, the park looked like a disturbed anthill. Nephis had insisted on healing the soldiers who had been hurt in the explosion, and there were no casualties. But an attempt on the life of one of the two princesses of valor, or maybe even both of them, was no small matter. Government forces flooded the scene, both to take care of the gate and to investigate the scandalous event. There was nothing they could find, of course, but doing nothing was not an option. Sunny had accompanied Nephis as she healed the soldiers and received their gratitude, both admiration and devotion burning in their relieved eyes. Then, he followed her to the side of a medical vehicle, where Morgan was waiting for them while typing something on her communicator with a cold expression. Seed, the fire keeper, was walking behind them sullenly, her civilian clothes in disarray. That was where Kai eventually found them. The charming archer relayed his findings with a troubled look on his face. "We will conduct a thorough investigation on the scene, of course, but I am afraid that we won't find anything. There is no physical evidence left, and since the attacker was careful enough to eliminate these traces, they would have had means to throw off our divination experts as well." He looked at Nephis with guilt in his eyes. "I am sorry, there is not a lot that the government can do." She grimaced silently. Morgan, however, was more vocal. Looking at Kai with a frown, she said in a cold tone, "NQSC is your territory. Please forgive me for being blunt, Saint Kai, but the government is allowed to exist because it is useful maintaining order in the waking world. If members of my clan can be freely attacked on your land with no consequences, then what use is there for the government?" He met her sharp gaze somberly, not saying anything. She scoffed and shook her head. "Fine, whatever." My little sister answered the call and hurried to prevent a gate crisis in her usual selfless manner, but ended up being struck by human arrows. Once the news gets out, what do you think will happen? Kai frowned, still having nothing to say. However, Sunny was staring at Morgan instead. She brings up an interesting point. How had this ambush been possible to begin with? It took a lot of time to plan an assassination, especially if the target was a saint. However, their decision to answer the emergency alert had been made on the spur of the moment. No one could have known that Nephis would be in this park on this day. The only way to predict her actions would have been to know about the descent of the gate in advance, as well as getting access to her schedule. Had the government known about the gate long before but held back the information, why would they? The location Morgan had chosen for the meeting was too conveniently close to the emerging gate as well. Was it a coincidence, or had she really known what would happen? Sunny tilted his head a little, an amusing thought surfacing in his mind. Did Valor send the sniper themselves? Why would they try to dispose of Nephis now? Had the ambush even been an earnest attempt to kill Nephis? Sure, a different saint could have been killed by those arrows, but it was very doubtful that she would have been seriously harmed. But then again, very few people really knew the full extent of Neph's abilities. The party responsible for the assassination attempt could have simply misjudged how hard she was to kill. Too many things seemed strange about this incident. One fact was undeniable, though: the entire situation smelled fishy. Nephis finally spoke, placing a hand on Morgan's elbow. "Morgan, that's enough." The Princess of War gave her a long look, then shook her head. "No matter. Even without any evidence, there are very few archers in the world who are capable of something like that. The government might not have the means, but we of Valor do. It won't be hard to find the suspect after investigating each of them. And when we do, mark my word, Saint Kai, there will be hell to pay." He bowed, hiding his face from view. "As you wish, Lady Morgan." Sonny was tired of seeing his friend being bullied by someone else, so he turned to Nephi's and asked, hoping to turn the conversation in a different direction. "How did you know that the PTV would explode?" She glanced at him, hesitated for a few moments, then looked away with a shrug. "You probably don't know, Lord Shadow, but there were many attempts on my life when I was younger. I have a lot of experience with this sort of thing. It's easy to notice if a vehicle has been tampered with if you know where to look. I always do." Sonny stared at her silently. "But I do know. You've told me before. I even witnessed it in your dreams." That was what he wanted to say. But of course he didn't. Soon, a convoy of heavily armored vehicles appeared near the entrance to the park. These ones painted in the colors of Clan Valor, not the government. Morgan looked at the convoy and put her communicator away with a heavy sigh. Glancing at Kai, she lingered for a moment and said with a semblance of decorum, "I will be going then. Please inform me immediately if there is any news about the investigation, Lord Kai." Then she turned to Nephi's. "Are you coming? You must be tired after healing all these people." Nephi's considered it, then shook her head. "I'll catch up with Kai. You go. There has to be a lot of things you have to deal with." A dark smile appeared on Morgan's face. "Ah, yes, I do now. Are you sure, though? Who says that there won't be a secondary attack? If someone manages to kill you, Father will be terribly cross with me." Nephi's raised her chin a little. Her voice remained even when she said, "Is there someone who can kill me?" Morgan remained silent for a bit, then chuckled and turned away. "Suit yourself. Well, my sister is right. If someone manages to kill her, they would have worked really hard." With that, she nodded to Sonny and walked away. "Until we meet again, Lord Shadow." Soon, her elegant figure disappeared from view, leaving him alone with Nephi's and Kai. Sonny sighed behind the mask. So these two are going to catch up. There was no place for him at their friendly reunion. So it would be better for him to leave as well. He opened his mouth, intending to say something curt and aloof, but to his surprise, Nephi spoke first. Giving Kai a poignant look, she turned to Sonny and asked, "Lord Shadow, would you mind keeping us company?" They left the impact zone in a government transport. The ride was much less luxurious than Neff's destroyed PTV, but Sonny, who had crossed countless kilometers in shaky military vehicles, did not mind. "I wonder how much that PTV cost." If Sonny had lost something that lavish and expensive, he would have been cursing the dead gods and drowning in bitterness. But Nephi's did not seem to mind the loss too much. Granted, her mood seemed a little strange. As they drove past the burned remains of the PTV, she stared at it intently, a distant look in her eyes. "Are you all right?" Sonny wished that it was him who had asked that, but the Lord of Shadows was not that considerate. So, he had kept silent and Kai spoke in his stead. Nephi's lingered for a few moments, then looked away from the wreckage and sighed. "Sure, it's just that the situation is so familiar, but the outcome is entirely different. Times have changed." It seemed that she was reminiscing about the past, just like Sonny. He had contemplated how different the dread of having to face a nightmare gate for the first time felt from today's battle, where he did not even have to lift a finger. Nephi's, meanwhile, must have been comparing the powerlessness she had felt as a child to today's attempt on her life. The difference had to be quite startling, considering that she was one of the most powerful saints in the world now. The transport moved along the streets of NQSC at a moderate speed. The news of what had happened, however, was spreading much faster. Sonny did not even want to imagine what kind of storm would rise when people learned that Changing Star, humanity's darling, had almost died to a human assassin, while defending innocent lives from a descending nightmare gate. The people responsible for the government's propaganda would be losing their minds by now. They were great masters of both disseminating and suppressing information, but this time, the incident was too sensational, and the parties involved were too renowned. There was no stopping this story from spreading far and wide, so they could only try to control it the best they could. The government was in a tight spot. It was a bit ingenious. Actually, Nephis was so beloved and venerated largely because the government had once decided to make her into a shining symbol for the whole of humanity. She had worked very hard to build upon that foundation, of course, but the government was responsible for the initial push. Now, however, someone had taken the fruit of their labor and used it against them. The public outrage caused by an attempt on changing Star's life would be proportional to the amount of effort the government had put into turning her into someone who was revered and admired by all. That reputation of hers had only grown more exalted in the last 4 years, reaching unimaginable heights. Was the assassin's real goal to undermine the government instead of killing Nephis? Sunny continued to contemplate who was behind the attack while the transport rolled across the streets of NQSC, eventually reaching a remote district. There, a modest manor stood apart from the bustling city, surrounded by a tall wall. This was the manor of the Immortal Flame clan, which served as the base of operations for the fire keepers in the waking world. The transport passed the security check and made its way to the underground vehicle stable. Kai sent the driver and the guards assigned to Nephis by the government away. Seed also bade them farewell and left, lamenting the state of her tattered clothes under her nose. The loss of the expensive ensemble seemed to bother her much more than the recent ambush. The firekeepers are certainly a strange bunch. Nephis led her 2 guests to a secure room in the depths of the manor. Noticing how well protected it was, both from modern means of surveillance and through extensive use of runic magic, Sunny realized that what she had planned wasn't really to catch up with Kai. He had suspected as much. He looked around with outward indifference, then pulled out a chair and sat down. I am guessing this is not a simple reunion among friends. Kai remained standing, leaning on a wall with one shoulder, while Nephis sat across from Sunny and nodded. Indeed. He tilted his head a little. May I know what the purpose of this meeting is, then? Nephis smiled faintly, remained silent for a moment, then looked at Kai. Do you know what Saint Nightingale's flaw is, Lord Shadow? Sunny leaned back, perfectly relaxed. He can sense lies, does he not? Kai's flaw wasn't exactly advertised, but he had also never made a point of keeping it a secret. So, anyone who wished to know would have known. Nephis nodded. Yes, I thought we'd have an honest conversation, you and I. As a habitual liar, Sunny couldn't help but grow tense at these words. There were so many things he was deceiving the world about. Had she learned 1 or 2 of his secrets? Which ones? How much trouble was he in? Of course, that was not necessarily the case. Nephis could have simply wanted to discuss something that did not tolerate falsehoods. In any case, none of Sunny's worries showed in his body language. In fact, he smiled behind the mask. After maintaining silence for a couple seconds, Sunny shrugged. Why not? I'm the most honest person in the world after all, 2 worlds even. Nephis stared at him for a moment, then glanced at Kai. Kai studied Sunny with a very strange expression, hesitated for a bit, and gave her a short nod. She seemed perplexed. Sunny suppressed a chuckle. So, what did you want to discuss with me, Lady Nephis? Nephis frowned slightly. However, her voice was even when she spoke. We've been dancing around the issue for a while now. You gave me plenty of hints, subtle or not. We are supposed to be allies, so what I want to discuss today will decide how far our alliance will go. If you don't mind, I will ask you a few questions. The nature of our partnership will depend on your answers." He remained silent, voicing no objections. She lingered for a while, then nodded and said, "First and foremost, I am quite curious. You seem to be very keen on knowing how I would kill a supreme Lord Shadow. What exactly makes you think that I, a princess of the sword domain, am so interested in regicide?" Sunny stared at her silently, cold darkness nestling in the eyes of his emotionless mask. His onyx armor glistened with a sinister luster in the dull lamplight. Eventually, he spoke in an aloof tone. "I can answer your question with 3 of my own." Nephi's raised an eyebrow. "Oh." He nodded, then said evenly, "Who attempted to kill you as a child? Why? And what would I do in your place after becoming a saint?" His voice turned even colder than usual. "Imagine that a bunch of traitors killed my father, conspired to ruin my clan, and turned my life into living hell. The further into hell I fell, the higher these despicable ghouls rose. Ah, if something like that happened to me, I would have been positively peeved." Sunny shrugged. "In short, it's because I know enough about you, Lady Nephis." She studied him for a while with a deadpan expression, then glanced at Kai. Receiving his confirmation, Nephis scowled. Her voice sounded a little flat. "I must say, my sister was right. You are indeed very well informed for a recluse, Lord Shadow." Sunny grinned behind the mask. "What can I say? I wasn't always a recluse." She contemplated for a few moments and eventually nodded. "All right, then my next question. Let's presume that you are correct and I do indeed harbor such an interest. But what about you? What is your reason?" Sunny chuckled. "Would you believe me if I said that my reason is exactly the same as yours?" Nephis thought for a moment, then shook her head. "Not really." He tilted his head a little. "Well, fair enough. It's not. In truth, I don't have as great a grudge against the sovereigns as you do. I do despise them a great deal, true, but to answer your question, I guess it has to do with what I desire." She pierced him with a heavy gaze. "And what is it that you desire, Lord Shadow?" He laughed coldly. "Oh, nothing much. A nice house with a scenic view, somewhere warm and pleasant, tasty meals and good company, enough money for a comfortable life, safety and well-being, stuff like that." Nephis blinked a couple of times. She seemed quite surprised by that answer. "You live in a dark temple in the middle of a death zone, surrounded by dreadful nightmare creatures. But all you desire is a nice house and tasty food." Sunny stared at her emotionlessly. "Don't forget the good company." He paused, then added evenly, "You might think that it's a simple wish, Lady Nephis, but that is the thing in this world we live in. Even a simple wish like that is insurmountable. One would have to be a god to live without worries. No, actually, even becoming a god might not be enough." She frowned. "What does it have to do with your enmity against the great clans and the sovereigns?" He remained silent for a few moments. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded dark and sinister. "The root of my enmity lies in the fact that they insist on dictating the shape of the world where I live, while not possessing enough competence to keep it safe. Their methods, their callousness, and their hubris are both misguided and loathsome. What better proof there is than this war they are about to start?" Sunny shook his head. "In other words, I disdain the notion of allowing the sovereigns to decide my fate. I would rather have the power to make such decisions for myself. I've fought long and hard to gain it." Kai nodded silently, signaling to Nephis that he was telling the truth. She took a deep breath and looked at Sunny silently. Slowly, white sparks ignited in her eyes, and a faint smile appeared on her face. "Next question, then. You could have moved independently or made alliances with all kinds of other people. Yet, you chose to build a relationship with me. Why?" Sunny stared at her for a few moments, then shrugged. What was he supposed to answer? "Because you are changing star." Noticing a silent question in her eyes, he added somberly, "You know, people these days tend to dismiss the value of a proper education. Take basic language skills, for example. Very few make an effort to earnestly learn the runic languages of the dream realm, relying on the spell to do the translating for them. If they did, however, they would have known what your true name really means, Lady Nephi's." Sunny smiled, hiding behind the motionless mask. "You are not a star that changes, but rather one that causes change. A star that brings ruin and misfortune, but also opportunity. We live in a time of great upheaval, and is there a better person to forge an alliance with than someone who is fated to be at the center of all these calamities?" He chuckled. "Someone like me, who is not fated for anything, can do worse than to attach myself to someone like you. It's even better if I place you in my debt. A common enemy, a shared fate, and a little bit of leverage is the perfect foundation for a lasting alliance, don't you think?" Sunny finished speaking and looked at Kai. The charming archer hesitated under his gaze, then nodded slowly. "There, that should be enough." However, this time, Nephis did not look to Kai for confirmation. Instead, she stared directly at Sunny and said, "You are lying." He frowned, taken aback. After a long pause, Sunny said in an even tone, "Hasn't Saint Nightingale just confirmed that I'm not?" She shook her head lightly. "Kai has the ability to discern lies, but he is too honest and too decent. There are many ways to deceive someone by telling the truth, and that is what you are doing, Lord Shadow. You are not telling me everything, which is fine. I don't need to know all your secrets, but I do need to know if we really share a common enemy and why you've decided to become my ally." Sunny remained silent for a while. Damn it! She had forgotten him, so why had she not forgotten all his lessons in deceit? Eventually, he sighed and looked away. Sunny lingered for a few moments, then allowed the mask of indifference the Lord of Shadow wore to crack a little, revealing a glimpse of sincerity. "Someone told me once that people like me are born to destroy things, not build them. That this world needs killers and destroyers more than it needs saviors and builders. Well, they were right." He looked at her, hiding behind an expressionless mask. "I am indeed best at killing. However, you know, there are people building things all over the dream realm today. There is a young girl building a road somewhere in the song domain right now. Elsewhere in the sword domain, a young father is developing a farm to feed his wife and child. These people might not be as powerful as me or as ambitious as me. They can't slay nightmare creatures as well as me. But they matter too." Sunny grimaced and added evenly, "That young girl, that farmer's child, and countless others like them. Ah, it's a bit embarrassing to admit, but I hope that all the killing I do will change the world into a shape that allows them to live their lives building new things, even if they have to build them on the ruins that people like us, changing star, leave in our wake." He leaned forward a little. "How is that for a reason?" She remained silent for a long while, looking at him calmly. Eventually, it seemed as if Nephis accepted his answer. She sighed, then asked nonchalantly, "Do you serve any of the three supremes?" Sunny shook his head. "I don't." She nodded. "Are you planning to betray me?" He chuckled. "Not particularly." Nephis raised an eyebrow, then she smiled slightly. "Are you hiding anything from me, Lord Shadow?" Sunny shrugged. "A great deal of things." She looked at Kai, received his confirmation, and then leaned back in her chair. "Fine, this is acceptable, then I'll be honest too." At that moment, the door opened, and someone who Sunny had very much not expected to see entered the room. Jet glanced at him with a scowl, then turned to Nephis and said, her voice harsh, "This guy reeks of death." A crooked smile twisted her lips. "I like him." Sunny was surprised to see Jet here. She was one of the executive leaders of the government now, after all. Someone like her was not supposed to visit members of a great clan unannounced. Not that he wasn't happy to see her. Jet was exactly like she had been before. Her ivory skin, raven black hair, and icy blue eyes made for a striking sight. Despite the fact that she had risen much higher in the government hierarchy by now, her uniform was pretty much the same. It was just that there were 4 stars on the insignia instead of 3. If anything had changed, it was that she seemed even more sleep-deprived than usual, if that was even possible. Sonny found himself staring at her without meaning to, but for a very different reason than he had during their first meeting. It was just good to see her after all that time. Jet stared back at him. "You must be the Lord of Shadows." He nodded and answered evenly. "You must be Soul Reaper Jet." She studied him for a moment, then raised an eyebrow. "What's up with the Halloween costume?" "Huh." Sonny tilted his head, contemplated her question, and asked seriously, "What is Halloween?" Jet blinked a couple of times. Eventually, she waved a hand at him. "Never mind. I've heard a lot about you, Shadow. It's nice to finally put a face to the name. Well, sort of. So no one is going to explain to me who this Halloween is. Rude." Sonny frowned behind the mask. "Only the good things, I hope." Jet grinned. "Well, they say that you rule a death zone, eat cursed nightmare creatures for breakfast, wrestle titans for fun, and can turn into all kinds of terrible monsters on a full moon." He stared at her somberly. "That is preposterous." She nodded and wanted to respond, but before she could, Sonny added in an even tone, "I can turn into all kinds of terrible monsters anytime I want. What does the moon have to do with it?" Jet seemed to forget what she was supposed to say. Standing beside her, Kai suddenly choked on thin air. Sonny smiled silently. Looking at Nephise, he asked, "Lady Nephise, you mentioned that you would be honest with me. I wonder what you were about to say." She lingered for a moment, but it was Jet who answered instead. "Officially, I am here to placate Nephise on behalf of the government. To tell you the truth, this assassination attempt saved me a lot of trouble. Otherwise, I would have had to come secretly. Actually, I am here to meet you, Shadow." Sonny studied the two of them, having a few guesses about what was about to happen. Nephise nodded. "We are waiting for a couple more people, as well." Almost as soon as she said it, Sonny became aware that someone else was in the room. He shifted his gaze, noticing that Cassie had appeared at some point, standing quietly beside a wall. The darkness nestling in the eyes of his mask seemed to grow even more impenetrable. "Song of the Fallen." She bowed lightly. "Lord Shadow." It wasn't that strange that he had not sensed her approach. Sonny could still feel the underlying fabric of existence rippling around them subtly, somewhat akin to the shockwave of an opening nightmare gate. It was a strange sensation that only saints could feel, announcing that someone had crossed over from another realm nearby. Cassie must have arrived directly from Bastion. But then Sonny sensed something else. A terrible premonition. In the next moment, there was the sound of energetic footsteps, and Effie entered the room gingerly. She looked around, and her gaze settled on Sonny. He tensed immediately. "Gods, what is that woman going to say now?" Effie stared at him for a few moments, then smiled. "Hey." With that, she turned to Nephise. "Way inferior to Master Sunless. I bet he can't even cook. Stay strong, princess." Nephise closed her eyes. Sonny, meanwhile, opened them wide. "What the hell do you mean, way inferior? How can I be inferior to that lazy bastard? I mean, we're the same person." Cassie had a very strange expression on her face. Nephise exhaled slowly, remained motionless for a moment, and opened her eyes again. "Lord Shadow, meet Saint Athena raised by wolves." Sonny stared at Effie, lamenting the fact that looks could not kill. Or rather, his looks could not. There had to be an awakened out there somewhere with such aspect, and definitely more than a few nightmare creatures. He said emotionlessly, "She's loud." Effie gave him a dirty look and grinned. "Wanna arm wrestle? If you win, I'll shut up." Scowling behind the mask, Sonny tilted his head and stared at her some more. He was tempted but did not wish to destroy the table. "I don't." She laughed. "Good choice." With that, she finally sat down. Now there were 6 of them sitting around a table, which, coincidentally, was round. Changing Star of the Immortal Flame Clan, Saint Cassia, Song of the Fallen, Nightsinger Kai, the Dragon Slayer, Saint Athena, raised by wolves, the War Beast, Soul Reaper Jet, and a mysterious transcendent known as the Lord of Shadows. The 5 saints looked at him, while Sonny stared back at them silently. "The cohort is all here." He secretly looked around. The room where they had gathered was not exactly opulent, but something told him that history was going to be made here today. He could practically sense it in the air, the omen of ruinous change. Sonny sighed and said evenly, "It seems that I've found myself in illustrious company." Nephi's remained silent for a while, then sighed. "I told you that the nature of our partnership would depend on your answers, Lord Shadow. Your answers were satisfactory, so I've decided to trust you. Enough so, at least, to bring you into the inner circle. These people are my closest confidants." She paused, then added after some deliberation, "Usually, I would not have been so quick to trust someone, but time is not on our side, and my instincts tell me that you deserve it. I've asked Saint Kai to help me confirm this feeling. I hope you won't take offense. Saint Cassia advised me to take this step as well." Sonny remained silent for a moment, then said in an aloof tone, "What a strange group. 2 renowned transcendent warriors of the sword domain, 3 exalted champions of the government, and me, a stray that has no master. Why exactly are the 6 of us gathered here together?" Nephi's looked at each of the gathered people slowly. Then she shrugged and answered in her usual even tone, "Because the 6 of us are going to destroy the sovereigns. 6 of them were going to destroy the sovereigns." Sonny was silent for a while, staring at the members of the cohort from behind his expressionless mask. Then he chuckled. "You want to topple both domains and completely change the world, with just 6 people." Nephi's remained composed and gave him a nonchalant shrug. "Why not? Wasn't the world I want to change shaped by just 3? He had no retort. The current shape of the world had indeed been dictated by 3 powerful individuals, Anvil of Valor, Kai Song, and Asterion. For the past 2 decades or so, they had been acting as the gods of humanity, deciding its fate from behind the curtains. And now, Nephis and her cohort were preparing to rise in rebellion against the gods. It was strangely poetic. It was also a little ominous, as if history was repeating itself. Sonny sighed. "So you are welcoming me into your underground revolution club. Well, fine. That has been my intention all along as well. But now that we have reached this point, I need to ask you the same question again, Lady Nephis. This time in a less hypothetical context. How do you plan to defeat the sovereigns?" She met his dark gaze calmly. "My answer stays the same, by attaining supremacy myself." His gaze suddenly turned much more intense. "Oh, have you found a way to become a supreme without challenging the 4th nightmare?" Sonny would lie if he said that he wasn't interested in hearing the answer. He had been trying to discover the secrets of supremacy himself. After all, in Neff's case, she couldn't challenge the 4th nightmare because she wasn't allowed to. But in his case, he simply couldn't without the spell. Coming into contact with nightmare seeds was meaningless. Not only was Sonny unable to enter a nightmare, but getting too close to a seed put him at risk of becoming corrupted. Nephis inhaled slowly, a hint of tension appearing in her eyes for a short moment. Did I find a way? This is a complicated issue. In a sense, yes, I did find a way to become supreme. However, I am still searching for the means of actually walking that path. Sunny frowned behind the mask. You will have to be more specific than that, I'm afraid. She looked away and smiled faintly. Each aspect is unique, and so, the paths to supremacy are unique for each individual. At the root of it all lies the act of imposing your will upon the world, thus attaining authority over it. But the actual imposition differs from aspect to aspect, as does the process. It all depends on one's source element. For now, what Nephis was saying followed Sunny's own guesses. What she said next, however, surprised him. My source element is longing, desire, yearning, passion, inspiration. The more people I inspire to feel a sense of longing, the more of them become a part of my source element. By building up my source element, I am building the foundation of my future domain. In fact, it has already been built. Sunny stared at her wordlessly. Huh. Suddenly, he saw many of the actions Nephis had taken in the last 4 years in a new light. The tireless wandering, the endless battles against the tide of nightmare creatures, the wordless compliance with being sent to handle the most deadly of calamities over and over again, the public appearances, even the theater plays secretly funded by Cassie. Sunny tilted his head a little. So, has Cassie secretly built her own propaganda machine to prepare for Neff's ascent to supremacy? It seemed very likely. He turned his head and stared at Jet. She smiled at him lazily. Yes, while Nephis and Cassie were working hard on their side, I've been subtly pulling the strings of the government to fan the flames. The initial decision to make Changing Star into a martyr was not my decision, but the reason why we haven't abandoned this narrative after she was adopted by Valor, and instead doubled down on it, is my doing. Sunny remained silent for a few moments. I understand why Changing Star is doing what she is doing and why Song of the Fallen is supporting her. But what about you, Soul Reaper? You as well, War Beast and Nightsinger. Why has the government decided to bet on her? Jet chuckled. The government is less monolithic than it has been before. The older generation is too stuck on the idea of maintaining neutrality. It has served them well in the past, so they are naturally biased and assume that it will continue to work. But I am of the opinion that they are wrong. In this new world, neutrality is a myth. No one will be allowed to remain on the sidelines once the sovereigns start fighting for dominance, let alone if one of them becomes a true hegemon. She shook her head. The government itself is different now, as well. Our power has grown greatly in the wake of the Chain of Nightmares. Countless Awakened never left after becoming part of the evacuation army, and while we have few saints, the ones we do have are among the most powerful ones in existence. For all intents and purposes, the government is like the fourth great clan now. Maybe even the third, considering the dwindling influence of the House of Night. Jet paused for a moment, then sighed. And that is an inevitable process. Soon enough, the dream realm will become humanity's new home. In that future, the role of the government will have to change. If we don't adapt, we will disappear, which is not really a problem since we would have served our purpose. But then the question is, who will rule that new world? A dark smile appeared on her ivory face, never reaching her cold blue eyes. The King of Swords, the Queen of Worms, or the third one, none of them are qualified. Sunny looked at her with curiosity. Why do you say that? He had his own reasons to believe that the sovereigns were not the best choice to guide humanity. But Jet had always been very practical. What was her reason? She chuckled. Sorry, it's nothing too philosophical. Actually, my reason is very simple. It's because Changing Star has gone from a mundane girl to a saint in about 5 years, while the sovereigns have been stuck at their rank for decades. Once we are all living happily in the dream realm, What will the one who wins the war do when an unholy titan wanders out of a death zone? Will they be able to contend with the future? I don't think so, so I am betting on someone who would, because I know that Nephis won't be satisfied with mere supremacy. When Jet finished speaking and gave him a relaxed smile, Effie added in a calm tone, "Big Sister is mainly preoccupied with the end result, but as for me, I care about how we get there as well. It's not enough to just preserve the world, it's also important what kind of world it will be. Right now, the stuck-up legacies are looking down on everyone. Drives me nuts, really. Can you imagine how much worse it will become once all of humanity is living under their roof? The kings, the queens, I don't trust any of them, but I do trust Nephis. She at least won't stop me from becoming a supreme myself. If anything, she'll probably push me into a nightmare seed." Nephis did not comment on that, making Effie smile. "You would, wouldn't you? See, she's not even denying it." After that, Kai broke the silence, speaking simply. "I just believe that it is the right thing to do. No more, but also no less." Sunny stared at them for a while. Eventually, he shook his head. What could he say? "You are all crazy." Then he smiled behind the mask. "Fortunately for you, I am as well. Fine, I like it. Let's conquer the world." After making the bold proclamation, Sunny paused for a moment and then added in an emotionless tone, "Or rather, two worlds. One more, one less, it doesn't really make a difference." Jet chuckled at his words, while the others just nodded with varying degrees of seriousness. Only Nephis did not react, simply looking at him calmly. Sunny sighed, leaned back a little, and said evenly, "However, let us return to the initial conversation. Lady Nephis, you said that your source element is the people whom you inspire, and that they are the foundation of your domain. However, what comes next? How do you plan on building upon that foundation to actually reach supremacy?" He was quite stumped. It seemed that Nephis was half of a step ahead of him. She had dived deeply into the nature of her source element, to the point of being able to enhance it. Sunny, however, had never even questioned whether his connection to the shadows could be deepened. What was he supposed to do? Actively try to build rapport with the wild shadows, turning them into his zealous followers? Would that bring him closer to supremacy as well? No, I am thinking about it wrong. Nephis had said it herself, and he knew it too. Each aspect was unique, and the process of realizing a domain differed for each awakened. What worked for her would not work for him, and vice versa. She had to weave a vast tapestry of yearning souls, inspiring people one by one. But his source element was shadows. As their lord, he already enjoyed the veneration of every shadow in existence. Sunny had no need to build a foundation for his domain. Or did he? If there was a process of accumulation involved in the initial stages of attaining supremacy, then what was he supposed to accumulate? The thought resonated with him so deeply that even the humble shopkeeper stopped what he was doing, far away in Bastion, frowning for a moment. Isn't it quite obvious? Unseen, Sunny's eyes gleamed under the mask. Had he not been accumulating something from the very start of it all? The legion of silent shadows dwelling in his soul, were they the foundation of his future domain? Shadow God had been the god of death as well, after all. Was Sunny limiting himself by ignoring the connection shadows had with death? If so, what the hell was the nature of his domain supposed to be? He grimaced, feeling more lost than he had been a minute ago. Maybe Nephis will enlighten me. Sunny waited patiently for her answer. Sadly, he was doomed to be disappointed. When Nephis finally spoke, a slight frown twisted her brow. "That I am not sure about. As I've said, I know the path to supremacy, but am unable to walk it yet. There has to be some kind of catalyst that will ignite the foundation I've built, turning it into an actual domain. The soul, the source element, the world, once all three are fused together by will, a sovereign is born. But how to fuse them? I do not know. Oh, damn it. Sunny sighed secretly. Well, it would have been too easy if the answer was handed to him on a platter. He remained silent for a while, then asked somberly, "So, what you are saying is that you must become a supreme to defeat the sovereigns without drowning the dream realm in the blood of mundane humans. However, you have no clue how to actually achieve it. Therefore, this whole uprising of ours is a gamble." Nephi smiled faintly. When has anything been without risk in this life? If you know a way to become supreme, Lord Shadow, I am all ears. He tilted his head and stared at her emotionlessly. If I knew a way, would I still be a saint? The last sovereign I killed was not very talkative, so I didn't have a chance to ask. In fact, Daron of the Twilight Sea had been entirely incapable of speech by the time Sunny killed him. Kai's chair suddenly wobbled. Nephi spared him a glance, then chuckled. Indeed. However, it is not entirely up to fate. In fact, I have a reason to believe that there will be progress soon. Sunny raised an eyebrow behind the mask. Oh, how so? She lingered for a moment. Once the war starts and we enter Godgrave, there will be plenty of great nightmare creatures around, as well as some cursed ones. Watching how they impose their will upon the world might give us a clue. More than that, in the later stages of the war, Anvil and Kai Song will take to the battlefield personally. Observing them will be even more illuminating. Nephi's paused, then added evenly. Additionally, I am moving toward a breakthrough in mastering my aspect legacy. I suspect that receiving that boon will be of great help. Sunny blinked a couple of times. Her aspect legacy. The last time he had glimpsed her runes, only one of the 7 fruits was unlocked, the knowledge of fire. It deepened her already startling connection to that element and bestowed knowledge upon her, including the true names having to do with flames. What other branches were there? Knowledge of souls, knowledge of authority. What knowledge was she hoping to receive? He remained silent for a moment, then asked directly, "What kind of breakthrough are you seeking?" Nephi's met his gaze and answered calmly, "Knowledge of passion. I've been studying passion as of late and have already made great strides in mastering it." Now it was Sunny's time to wobble. It took all his self-control not to fall out of his chair. He remained still through sheer will, not allowing even a hint of his emotions to show in his body language. Passion. How is she studying passion? What great strides? What exactly is she mastering and with whom? Outwardly, Sunny remained calm. But internally, he was fuming. After a long silence, he asked evenly, "What does passion have to do with anything?" Nephi's looked at him with a hint of confusion. "It has to do with my source element, of course. What else?" Sunny let out a mental sigh of relief. "It's all right, it's all fine. She's not practicing passion with anyone." Luckily, the conversation could be safely guided elsewhere. Or so he thought. Because right at that moment, Effie suddenly said, "Oh, right. I am sure that it's not the case, but if Master Sunless is having trouble making you achieve a breakthrough, tell him to come see my husband. Let the man learn from the master. That guy is a real veteran." Something fell on the floor noisily. Kai silently covered his face with a palm. Jet's smile widened a little. Cassie turned her head, pretending to look away. Sunny was appalled. "Who says I need to learn anything, you vile woman? I am myself a weight. Why am I even thinking about her nonsense? Damnation." Nephi's looked at Effie in confusion. "Isn't your husband an awakened? Plus, Master Sunless is a real veteran too. And what does he have to do with my aspect legacy?" Sunny felt vindicated. "Thank you, no stop what?" Effie stared at Nephi's with a strange mix of mischievousness and exasperation. After a few moments of silence, she said in a low tone, "Princess, you mean that he served in Antarctica too, right?" Neff's confused frown deepened. Of course, what else could I mean? Effie sighed and waved a hand in the air, giving up. Forget it. Gods, why do I even bother? After Sonny was introduced to the general shape of the plot, more technical details had to be discussed. The war was approaching swiftly, and at least 3 of the 6 conspirators would have to participate in the bloodshed directly. The other 3 could be drawn into the deadly game between the 2 sovereigns, as well. Both the government and the House of Night were desperately trying to maintain neutrality, but it was unknown if the great clans would cross the line in exerting pressure, thus making at least one of the neutral sides an accomplice in the domain war. Jet seemed a little troubled. Our position was more or less stable before, but now, with that damned assassination attempt, I don't know. The situation is unclear. She glanced at Cassie and raised an eyebrow. The blind seer seemed distracted for a moment, then said quietly, "The news is spreading like wildfire, both in the waking world and in the dream realm. By now, it's all people are talking about. Everyone is outraged, of course. Even the legacy clans are incensed. The situation is much more fiery in the sword domain, incendiary, but the song domain is reacting badly too. Nef's influence transcends borders." Jet frowned. That was fast, too fast even. Cassie nodded. Someone has been prepared. They are adding oil to the fire. As everyone fell silent, Nephi said in an even tone, "I wonder who is responsible this time." Jet looked at her, lingered for a few moments and smiled crookedly. "It wasn't your own performance." Nephi's frowned slightly, not exactly offended by her words but seemingly displeased. Her answer was short. "No." Sonny listened with interest. Actually, he had considered that the whole thing was staged by Cassie as well. That would be in line with both her goal and her cunning. However, a few things didn't add up. Nephi's leaned back and sighed. "My first thought was that it had been planned by Morgan. But it's not really her style. If Morgan was behind the assassination, there would have been countless victims among the government soldiers. She is always thorough, after all." Jet crossed her arms, considering. Eventually, she simply shook her head and said with a hint of frustration in her voice, "Then who the hell did it? It couldn't have really been Song, could it?" Kai seemed troubled as well. He remained silent for a while before saying cautiously, "Actually, it could have been. Princess Morgan was right when she said that there aren't a lot of archers in the world who can pull off something like that. The 2 prime suspects, coincidentally, are from the Song domain. One is Silent Stalker. The other is Dar of the Maharana clan." Sonny smiled darkly behind the mask. That guy. He had considered Dar of the Maharana clan as well. The man had an eerie ability to hit targets from a great distance and was fond of using oversized arrows to boot. Sonny had brushed sides with him during the Dreamscape tournament, almost catching a few of those arrows himself. Later, they crossed swords in the elimination rounds, where the legacy scion was cut down by Mongrel. He had not left a good impression. Maharana was one of the vassal clans of Song, too. Effie scratched the back of her head. Dar of the Maharana clan. Last I heard of him, he was a master. Where is he now? Cassie answered a moment later, effortlessly pulling the information out of her head. He is presumably still a master, although no one has seen or heard of him in the last 6 months. He could have challenged the 3rd nightmare and transcended in secret, or died trying. Sonny remained silent for a few moments, then spoke in his usual aloof tone. "I can tell you who is behind the assassination attempt." He had not been certain before, but now, the pieces fit together too perfectly. The rest of them looked at him, waiting for an explanation. Sonny leaned forward a little. "Your instinct was correct, Lady Nephi's. It was indeed Morgan Well, or at least Clan Valor. Of course, they never really intended to kill you." Nephi's nodded. "That much is clear. No one who would want to kill me is stupid enough to try so half-heartedly. But why are you pointing at Clan Valor? He grimaced behind the mask. The assailant had to know your schedule. They also had to know that the Nightmare Gate would lure you into the open. Of course, the sniper could have tried to hit you on a crowded street, or even through several walls, but that park was too convenient of a location for that kind of attack to be a coincidence. I am pretty sure that Morgan knew about the gate in advance and chose the location of our meeting accordingly. I assumed that she wanted to gauge my power, but she simply wanted to deliver you to the impact zone. Sonny paused for a moment, then shook his head. No, actually, it is more likely that she wanted both. The Princess of War is very efficient. After all, her actions rarely pursue only one goal. Effie frowned. Why do it, though? He stared at her silently for a moment. As I've said, Morgan's actions tend to accomplish several goals at the same time. So, why stage an attempted assassination on her little sister? The first reason is quite obvious, since you and your fellow government representatives are suffering the outcome right now. It is to discredit the government and gain leverage against it. Soul Reaper mentioned that your position has been destabilized. By playing the indignation card and acting offended on behalf of their adopted daughter, the Elders of Valor are now in a position to put pressure on you to join their side. Jet chuckled. Just that much leverage won't be enough. Well, most likely. Sonny nodded. Yes, but that is only because discrediting the government is merely a secondary goal of the entire affair. Kai frowned, then asked him somberly, what is the primary goal then? Sonny sighed behind the mask. You know, there are a lot of nasty rumors flying around the Song domain about Clan Valor. How people from the Sword domain are monopolizing resource shipments from the waking world to make their lives more miserable. How most of the Elders of Valor, including the King of Swords himself, have been taken by the Skinwalker. How people there are suffering under the tyranny of corrupt legacies and cry out to the heavens for help. He leaned back and shrugged. Of course, plenty of such rumors are spreading about Clan Song in the Sword domain as well. The Queen of Worms is a rotten fiend. She kills innocent people to enslave them into her undead army. The Song sisters feed on human blood, stuff like that. All these rumors are false, naturally, well, except that last one. That one might actually be true. In any case, they are carefully prepared and spread by both sides for a single purpose. An expression of disgust appeared on Kai's face. He remained silent for a few moments, then uttered through gritted teeth, a justification. Sonny nodded. Indeed, the great clans need to warm up the populace to the idea of war. Not only the masses, but also the awakened warriors who will be fighting on the front lines. I am sure there is a version of it for the vassal clans as well, not that those have a lot of choice when it comes to obeying the sovereigns. So, for those of you who are fond of history, you must know what casus belli is. The faces of several people in the room darkened. Effie coughed. Casus belli, sure. We all know it, of course. But to those of us who don't, can you explain, please? Sonny was tempted to tell her to ask her husband for an explanation, but held himself back. Instead, he said in an emotionless tone, sure, there is not much to explain. Casus belli is just a fancy term for justification, an official reason given when starting a war. An assassination of a royal is more than enough reason to drown the world in blood. In fact, this exact scenario was used before to do just that. He chuckled coldly. Honestly, I would have expected Valor to actually kill one of their saints in order to have a more solid claim. But either someone among them is growing soft, or they can't allow themselves to lose even a single transcendent before the war. In any case, someone attempts to kill Changing Star, humanity's favorite saint, and both of the main suspects just happen to be from the Song domain. One of them is even conveniently unavailable for questioning. This is more than enough ground to spin a pretty tale. Sunny sighed. As for the fact that none of the government soldiers had died, which is unlike how ruthless Morgan usually acts, that is the result of a shrewd calculation, as well. If the purpose of the assassination attempt is to make Clan Valor look like the wronged party, then wouldn't it be counterproductive to make the government suffer more losses than Clan Valor did? Who would look like the true victim then? So it was all part of the plan. His cold voice echoes in the room, sounding more than a little bit sinister. As everyone was digesting his words silently, Sunny laughed. Well, at least that is how I would have done it, with more flair, of course. Nephis looked at him somberly, not saying anything. Eventually, though, she spoke in an even tone. So, they had someone pretend to try and kill me while using the method that would point at someone serving Kai's song. This gives them the ammunition they need to both declare war and maintain the illusion of righteousness, eventually. And as an added bonus, they even get a chance to pressure the government into making concessions, or even joining their side entirely. He nodded. More or less. Nephis sighed and looked away. She remained silent for a while, then said quietly, "Well, good. It plays into our hand, actually. If I become the catalyst for the start of the war, it would only be logical for me to be the one to end it." At that moment Cassie spoke, her voice a little grim. "If they are already moving so openly, then it seems that we have even less time than we thought. I'm afraid that some of our plans will have to be accelerated or even abandoned entirely." Sunny scowled behind the mask. "Yeah, like me forging a sword for Nephis. I doubt I can make it in time, can I?" Nephis gritted her teeth. "It has been a long time coming. All we can do is prepare ourselves the best we can. When Song and Valor go to war, the only side that shall win is us." She looked at the people gathered in the room, her gaze settling on Sunny. Suddenly, a faint smile appeared on her face. "Or we'll die. Lord Shadow, that favor I owe you, you'd better call it in soon. You might not get the chance later." He crossed his arms and stared back at her. "Who gave you permission to die?" Sunny smiled slightly behind the mask, then said in a cold tone, "You are too weak right now. Become stronger first." Nephis remained silent for a moment, then chuckled. "All right, if you insist that I become stronger, it seems that I have no other choice. I will." Soon after that, the secret meeting ended. The members of the cohort left, some openly, some in secret. Sunny himself simply crossed the border between the realms, returning to the nameless temple. There was a lot for him to do. Outside the manor of the immortal Flame clan, the engines of war were churning, and the world was moving on. In the days following Sunny's appointment as the memory purveyor of the Fire Keepers, the brilliant Emporium had undergone a transformation. Once established as a cover for his ability to weave sorcery, the Memory Boutique was suddenly thriving due to the high number of acquisition deals flowing through it, almost as if he was a real merchant. The Fire Keepers were quite generous. Nephis did not enjoy the favor of the Valor Elders, so her private troops rarely received resources that a princess's personal guard deserved. They existed on a pitiful stipend that wouldn't cover the needs of 50 awakened, let alone half a hundred masters. Nevertheless, they were quite rich. Their riches did not come from the great clan, but from their own exploits instead. Every time Valor sent Nephis and her Fire Keepers to deal with a terrible calamity of some sort, which happened on a regular basis, countless abominations would fall to their swords. That meant that there would be many memories and echoes brought back from each expedition, as well as valuable materials harvested from the nightmare creatures. The Fire Keepers kept the best for themselves and sold the rest. That way, they were quite self-sufficient, and their coffers never ran empty. Cassie managed the assets of the Fire Keepers, investing in various enterprises throughout the sword domain. In fact, Many establishments in Bastion and other young cities had been funded by her on behalf of Nephis, not only bringing in stable income, but also adding to Changing Star's reputation. There was a sizable charity fund established by the firekeepers, as well, helping people in need. In short, Nephis was quite affluent despite being shunned by the elders of Clan Valor. And now Sunny was benefiting from her wealth, as well. There were a lot of mocking rumors about him in Bastion these days, calling him names and detailing what it was exactly that he was doing for Nephis in exchange for her money and gifts. But Sunny didn't mind, in fact. He was of the firm belief that everyone talking nonsense about him were simply jealous. Who wouldn't want to receive expensive gifts and attention from a stunningly beautiful young lady? What was there to feel shame about? If they did not know how to put themselves in such an envious position, it was their problem. Plus, of all the things Sunny had learned over the years, shame wasn't one of them. He had none to begin with. In any case, the brilliant Emporium was now handling the flow of memories in and from the Ivory Island, collecting a commission from each deal. Granted, the firekeepers weren't selling much these days. They were, however, on a spending spree. The war was just beyond the horizon, and everyone who knew anything about it was in a hurry to arm themselves as well as possible. Aiko was so giddy that Sunny was seriously concerned that the petite girl would explode from the excitement. Her greed and love for money put even his own prodigious avarice to shame. The deal with the firekeepers was not the only reason why the brilliant Emporium was doing better than usual, though. The restaurant side of the business was booming as well. And the reason for that was not just Sunny's face. Well, it was, in a manner of speaking. The real reason was that damned duel with Tristan of the Aegis Rose clan. Sunny had expected that playing the role of Changing Star's lover would attract a lot of attention, of course. What he had not expected was how much the citizens of Bastion loved to gossip, and how much free time they had on their hands. These people. There were no empty seats in the dining hall, and apart from a couple of regulars, the rest of the crowd was here for only one reason: to catch a glimpse of the despicable mongrel who had cunningly bewitched Changing Star. The thrill-seekers had even scared away his regular customers. Fewer and fewer of them were showing up in the brilliant Emporium each day, to Sunny's chagrin. He could hear the hum of their whispers from the kitchen. I saw him. Good gods, I was on the fence before, but now I really understand Lady Nephis. No way, that bastard is deceiving her. He must be a Song spy. What spy? Why would people from the Song domain send spies here? What, you haven't heard? Their creepy queen is just straight evil. She even sent assassins to kill Lady Nephis. She wouldn't dare. It's true, everyone is talking about it. That's why I think that this mongrel is a spy. Quiet, you idiot. What if the mongrel hears you? Don't you know how many people he massacred in the castle? Still, he doesn't look like a spy. He's too dreamy to be a spy. Stuck in the kitchen, Sunny gritted his teeth and concentrated on cooking. That's Lord Mongrel to you fools. He was tempted to spit into the pan. Of course he didn't. Fools or not, he had a reputation to uphold. Sunny did not care if his name was being dragged through the mud. But no one was allowed to besmirch his cooking. In the end, he was almost relieved when it was time to close the shop. Sunny chased away the last customers, locked the door, and collapsed onto the shadow chair in utter exhaustion. What a contradictory feeling. On one hand, he was tired of hearing idiots talk trash about him. On the other hand, the idiots paid a good amount of coins to spend time in the brilliant Emporium. So, it was a good thing overall. Sunny remained motionless for a while, then sighed and descended into the memory boutique. There, Aiko was busy checking the descriptions of the memories she had recently purchased. She was in charge of the whole operation, not only because she had better business sense than him, but also because Sunny was unable to receive and transfer memories, like all carriers of the nightmare spell could. The memories he crafted had to be designed with the customer in mind. Sunny had stolen a trait from the shard memories of the Forgotten Shore, which had the ability to bind themselves to those who touched them. After modifying it a little, he was able to devise a way to bestow the memories on the clients without transferring them directly from his own soul. Which meant that for the deals concerning purchased memories, he needed an awakened courier. Aiko played the role splendidly, delivering the memories to the fire keepers in person. "How is it going?" The petite girl looked up from the documents and grinned. "All accounted for, boss. We even managed to find a weapon with the weird combination of enchantments that Master Shim requested. Damn, it's still strange to call that guy a master. I remember how he used to nag the older hunters for losing all their shards gambling with me, back in the Bright Castle." Sunny smiled. "Good then. Make a trip to the castle tomorrow. Come back early, though. I won't survive in the kitchen alone." Aiko shuddered at the word early, then sighed and gathered the documents. "See you tomorrow, boss." Soon she was gone. Sunny had followed her onto the porch and remained there for a while, watching the sun set and the full moon rise. Tonight was the night he had to meet Cassie again. Cassie was waiting for him near the same toppled tower as the last time. She was just as ethereally beautiful as the last time, too, bathed in moonlight and standing on the edge of tranquil water. However, the atmosphere of their meeting was different today. It was more familiar somehow, perhaps even friendly. When Sunny emerged from the lake, Cassie smiled faintly. "Sunny." He brushed his wet hair back and smiled, as well. "Lady Kasia." She shook her head lightly. "It feels unfair that you are still maintaining decorum after insisting that I should be more informal. Call me Cassie, please." He hesitated for a few moments, then nodded. "All right, Cassie, shall we go? I am hoping to explore as much of the mirror labyrinth as possible tonight." She nodded and offered him her small hand. Sunny took it and pulled them both into the shadows, teleporting straight to the underground chamber they had discovered before. This time, there was no need for her to guide him deep into the ruins of the castle, erasing the memories of the nights patrolling it. The chamber had not changed at all, which was a relief. Sunny vividly remembered the warning Cassie had given him about the others, so he was wary of the beings that lived inside the mirrors in the former stronghold of the demon of imagination. Summoning the shadow lantern, he drowned the maze in shadows without wasting any time. Soon after, Sunny and Cassie continued to explore the labyrinth. "This place is vast." They had wandered it for hours the last time, and were not making any noticeable progress tonight. Slowly, Sunny was starting to grow wary. He remembered the nightmare desert and the black pyramid standing at its center. No matter how long one walked across the white dunes, the pyramid never drew closer. Was there some sort of trickery preventing him from reaching the heart of the labyrinth as well? They walked in silence for a while, but quickly grew bored of it. Eventually, Cassie spoke. "I must admit, Master Sunless Sunny, you are a fascinating man." He raised an eyebrow. "I am." The blind seer chuckled melodiously. "Indeed, I suspected that you were, of course, when we first met. But knowing it and witnessing it in person are two different things. That stunt you pulled with poor Master Tristan, I pride myself on being able to predict things, you know. However, that caught me by surprise. What were you thinking?" Sunny coughed quietly. What was he thinking, indeed? He kept quiet for a few moments, then said nonchalantly, "Well, thinking too much is bad for one's health. Back then I was thinking, gods, I want to punch this buffoon so much. And so I did. It's all about the little joys in life." She drew a sharp breath. "I guess." Sunny grinned. "Anyway, it ended up working in our favor, didn't it? We wanted everyone to get the wrong impression about the nature of the relationship between me and Nephi's. Well, mission accomplished. Cassie exhaled slowly. A little bit too well, even. He glanced at her. Whatever is worth doing at all is worth doing well. The blind seer did not find what to answer. She remained silent for a while, then laughed quietly. True, then there is your true body, the Lord of Shadows. Meeting him in person was quite an experience. The contrast between him and Master Sunless is quite striking, to say the least. I applaud your acting skills. Sunny looked at her curiously, hesitated for a bit, and then smiled. Why, thank you, but actually you are wrong. Cassie raised an eyebrow elegantly. I am. He nodded. This is my true body. The Lord of Shadows is a shadow, he's a performance. She tilted her head a little baffled. Wait, you mean to say that this, the shopkeeper, is your true personality, and the aloof saint of Godgrave is merely an act? Sunny smiled, then sighed, and eventually looked away. Yes, but also no. I guess each of my incarnations is me, it's just that they have different purposes. The purpose of the Lord of Shadows is to be a warrior, so the parts of my personality that have to do with conflict take the lead. The purpose of the humble shopkeeper is to live peacefully and enjoy life. So he's a bit of a homebody. He paused and then added with a shrug. It's not that strange. We all wear different masks when dealing with different people. A person will behave one way when they are with their family, act differently when they are with their colleagues, and put on a new mask when they meet their friends. I am much the same. It's just that I have many bodies, so I can wear all the masks at the same time. Cassie looked at him thoughtfully. Isn't it easy to lose sight of your true self that way? Sunny smiled. You might not know, but I am the world's topmost expert on not losing my true self. Shadows are formless and shapeless by nature, so I have to be careful not to forget the shape of my soul. She lingered for a while, then let out a wistful sigh. I'll have to ask you for advice one day then. I also struggle with maintaining my sense of self. Living through other people's senses and experiencing their innermost memories can be disorienting sometimes. Cassie smiled, then asked in a gentle voice. But speaking of the Lord of Shadows, can I ask you something? Sunny glanced at her briefly. You can. She nodded, hesitated for a moment, and said, Before, you asked me to keep the true identity of Master Sunless to myself, saying that Nephi's would not trust either if the connection between him and the Lord of Shadows was revealed. But now, you are not a stranger to her anymore. She has accepted Lord Shadow into her inner circle and entrusted him with her life. Likewise, Neph is sympathetic toward Master Sunless. Why maintain the charade? Sunny did not answer immediately, contemplating her question. Why did he want to keep that secret? He hesitated for a while, then sighed. Because it's fun. It was a callous answer, but a truthful one. Well, of course it was, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to give it. There was no strategic reason to keep Nephi's in the dark anymore. And yet, Sunny was enjoying himself too much to let it go already. Nephi's did somewhat trust the Lord of Shadows now, but she was also wary of him, because anyone who possessed such power would make people wary. The humble shopkeeper, however, wasn't powerful at all, so she could allow herself to be at ease around him. And to Sunny, such moments were precious. They were much closer to the relationship they had before becoming saints than the courteous distance between her and the Lord of Shadows. He didn't want to lose these moments, yet. Cassie let out a small laugh. Fun? Well, I have to admit it is indeed a lot of fun, however. She lingered for a moment and asked quietly, Don't you think that it is unfair to her to keep such a secret? Sunny kept quiet, the smile slowly disappearing from his face. Eventually, he let out a sigh and lowered his head. You are right, it is indeed unfair, But don't worry, I'll tell her soon. He looked ahead and added with a hint of regret in his voice. I'll tell her before the war starts. Until then, well, Master Sunless should probably make an effort to enjoy his last days of peace as much as possible. The two of them continued to explore the labyrinth, sometimes keeping silent, sometimes chatting about this and that. Sadly, Sunny failed to solve the maze this time, as well. Not long before the dawn came, he found himself back in the underground chamber, face to face with Cassie. It was time to show her another memory. The battle had just ended, and the winter beast was gone. The dark ecstasy of having killed the butcher of Falcon Scott had washed over Sunny's heart and receded like a tide, leaving it cold and hollow, dark and utterly devoid of light. There was nothing binding him to the world anymore. He was banished from the nightmare spell, fate, and existence itself. In the whole world, two worlds, actually, not a single soul cared whether he lived or died. No one even remembered that he existed. Facing the cruel truth of that loss was too painful, and so, Sunny longed to leave it behind. He opened his eyes in a familiar hall. Warm sunlight was pouring through the stained glass windows, painting the ivory walls with vibrant colors. Heavy chains lay on the floor, arranged into a flawless circle. The sky was vast and blue outside. The ivory island floated on the sea of clouds, enveloped by a peaceful silence. Sunny had not wanted to come here. In fact, he wanted nothing more than to avoid this place at all costs. However, this was where his soul was anchored to the dream realm, and so, this was where he had arrived after giving up on the waking world. Standing in the center of the chain circle, Sunny shifted slightly and dissolved into the shadows. The ivory tower was mostly empty right now. Most of the firekeepers were still lost in the depths of their nightmares, while Nephi's and the rest of the cohort were too busy to visit it often. Still, he didn't want to be seen by anyone. They could not remember him even if he told them who he was, so there was no point. Sunny glided across the floor as a shadow, hiding in the darkness near the gate. Then, he extended his shadow sense outward and froze. On the emerald grass outside the great pagoda, two people were walking toward its gate. The sunlight suddenly seemed brighter. He kept himself hidden when they entered the sunlit hall. Nephi's was frowning, while Cassie followed her with a strangely lost expression on her delicate face. Sunny remained motionless as he unwillingly eavesdropped on their conversation. "Are you sure?" Cassie nodded slowly. "Yes, I think I am. The future has grown too elusive to decipher." Nephi's halted and remained silent for a few moments. "Can it be connected to your transcendence, or witnessing that thing in Verge?" The blind girl hesitated briefly. "That was what I thought as well. However, I've reached out to several seers in confidence. They all seem to be having trouble glimpsing anything from the future, as well, all over the world." Neff's scowl deepened. What can be the reason? An aftershock of the dream gates being open, the chain of nightmares itself. She shook her head and continued walking. "We will have to investigate it later. Right now, there is too much to do. It is pure pandemonium out there, with so many people suddenly arriving in the dream realm. The refugee camp outside Bastion is lacking provisions and manpower, with too few awakened to guard them against the nightmare creatures. At least there is no lack of water, but all of it was too sudden. The situation can swiftly descend into a disaster." Cassie sighed. "I heard that they are going to build a city on the lake shore, and with the sleepers of Antarctica having awakened, there are much more capable warriors now than before." Nephi's nodded. "Still, I am going there to help." The blind girl remained silent for a moment. "I see, I'll go with you then." Sunny hid in the shadows, listening to the news about the tribulations of humanity without interest. What did it have to do with him? Nothing at all, not anymore. Nephi shook her head. Someone has to stay here to welcome our people once they return from the nightmares. Plus, you have another important task to accomplish. Cassie raised an eyebrow. You really want to do it? Nephi's gave her another nod. It is time to abandon the chained isles. We are too far away from everything important here. I want you to fly the Ivory Island south, toward Bastion. With that, she turned around and walked into the circle of chains. Standing there, Nephi's frowned and briefly touched her face. She remained motionless for a while, then said somberly, "Why do I feel like I'm forgetting something?" Cassie did not answer, simply standing there with a confused expression. Eventually, Nephi's grimaced. "That other issue, have you been able to discover anything?" Cassie slowly shook her head. "No, I talked with Effie and Kai again, Jet too, but it's hard to dispel the fog that's clouding some of our memories. I think it must have been Torment who had done something to us. But what? And why? And when? There is no answer yet." Nephi sighed. "Keep digging, I'll do some research too." Soon she was gone, returning to the waking world. Cassie did not move for a while, standing there with her head lowered. Eventually she whispered quietly, "What has she done to me?" With that, she turned around and descended into the basement of the Ivory Tower, where the runic controls of the island were located. Sunny was left alone. He exhaled slowly and emerged from the shadows, looking in the direction where Cassie had gone. Torment? Did she really believe that her defiled twin had been capable of doing something like that? The timeline didn't make sense, and Cassie knew it. Well, it was a reasonable theory to make. Torment's power, Cassie's power, had to do with manipulating memories after all. For a moment, a desperate hope ignited in his heart. What if Cassie could restore the memories of him with her transcendent ability? What if he could make them remember? But no, he knew that it was impossible. If it was, she would have already done so, restoring her own lost memories first. "I'm sick of it." He gritted his teeth and walked out of the Ivory Tower. By now, the crushing was of no threat to him. Sunny wasn't sure if he could endure its terrible pressure, but he also did not need to. The range of his shadow sense had grown enough to reach the distant islands, so he could simply step through the shadows to leave the Ivory Island behind. He contemplated for a few moments, considering if he should. What was he going to do anyway? Live like a hermit in some god-forsaken corner of the dream realm? Leave to travel the unexplored regions of this dreadful world, away from where any human could see him? Jump into the sky below and try to reach its bottom out of curiosity? Each alternative was as good as the next one. Well, jumping into the sky below was probably a bit worse than the rest. Sunny remained still for a while, thinking. In the end, he did not use Shadow Step to reach the flying island far below. Instead, he circled the great pagoda and headed toward the graceful gazebo, where the portal to the Ebony Tower stood. If he remembered correctly, there was a chamber in Nether's scorched tower where the walls were engraved with countless runes. Sunny had not been able to understand those runes before, or at least retain the understanding of the ancient demon's words. After his visit to the estuary, however, who knew what he would be able to learn? The Ebony Tower was just like the last time Sunny had seen it, floating ominously in a boundless black void, with a sea of fire burning above it relentlessly. The firekeepers had established an outpost here, but after the chain breaker gained the ability to brave the crushing, they only maintained a token presence in the sky below. Now that Neff's followers had left to challenge the nightmares, there was not a soul around. He stepped out of the black arch on the highest level of the obsidian pagoda and remained there for a while, staring into the distance. Somewhere far away, in a different world, one of his shadows was following Rain. Sunny had to think of a way to approach her openly, but his current mental state was too volatile to try. "I'll think of something later." Nothing moved in the sky below, Nothing disturbed the cold silence. Rid of the suffocating pressure of human company, he felt comfortable for the first time in a while, or at least numb. There was consolation in solitude. Sonny exhaled slowly, then allowed the onyx mantle to retreat back under his skin. With his military bodysuit in tatters, he was left practically naked. After hesitating for a bit, Sonny allowed the wild shadows to envelop his lithe body and manifested them into a semblance of soft fabric. Summoning the endless spring, he satiated his thirst and left the 6th level of the ebony tower. The 5th level consisted of one large chamber. It was shrouded in darkness, with countless runes covering the obsidian walls. These runes were the reason why Sonny had chosen to come to this place. He stared at them emotionlessly. I knew it. Before, Sonny had been unable to read the forbidden runes. In fact, simply beholding them had almost killed him, but things were different now. Not only had he grown vastly more powerful since his day as an awakened, but he had also received the revelations of madness from the sin of solace. Thanks to that, he glimpsed the secrets that Ariel had left behind, and was seemingly inoculated against the power of the forbidden runes by the knowledge of the forgotten god. And so, Sonny did not feel repelled by the runes carved into the walls of the ebony tower anymore. All he felt was a slight sense of discomfort. Of course, he still had to be careful when studying them. The knowledge of the void that a demon was capable of enduring could very well plant seeds of corruption into his transcendent soul, and there was no telling if any of it was mixed between the passages concerning the forgotten god. There was also a bit of a problem. Nether had not used the runic alphabet Sonny was most familiar with while leaving the notes on the wall, and since the spell never translated the forbidden runes, he could not do it himself from memory. After years of wandering the dream realm and exploring ancient ruins, he could somewhat decipher the meaning, but a proper translation would take a lot of time. Which was fine. Sonny had nothing but time these days. He did not get to work immediately, though. What was the rush? Instead, Sonny left the 5th level behind and descended lower. He passed the solemn shrine on the 4th floor, the workshops on the 3rd floor, the divine flame reservoir on the 2nd floor, where Weaver's arm had once been left to burn, devoured by the harrowing rot, and finally reached the 1st level of the ebony tower. That was where the firekeepers had established their living quarters. The central chamber had been shrouded in darkness once, but now it was brightly lit by a multitude of enchanted lanterns. Sonny counted them calmly and smiled. Each of the lanterns was a memory belonging to one of the firekeepers. They had been left behind here for a reason. For as long as the master of the lantern was alive, their lantern would continue to glow. If they perished, the lantern would dissipate into a rain of sparks, destroyed with the rest of their memories. There was a similar chamber in the ivory tower, which could tell if any of them had died. From the look of it, the firekeepers were doing well in the second nightmares. The number of lanterns had not dwindled at all, at least not yet. Looking away, Sonny walked over to one of the cots and fell on it heavily. As soon as his head hit the pillow, his eyes closed on their own. He was tired. It was time to sleep. Tomorrow, his new life as an aimless wanderer would begin. Sonny woke up feeling refreshed. It was still strange to him to sleep while one of his incarnations stayed awake. In such moments, his consciousness seemed to split, one part of it functioning normally, the other drifting in the comforting embrace of slumber. He even dreamed sometimes, while simultaneously observing his dreams from the side. In any case, his mental fatigue lessened no matter which incarnation slept, as long as one of them did. Rising from the cot, Sonny looked around groggily. There was nothing pressing he had to do, so he was not in a hurry. He summoned the covetous coffer, took out some supplies, and seasoned some monster meat. While it was roasting, Sonny brewed himself a pot of coffee. Then he took the pot, and the plate of meat outside and ate breakfast while dangling his feet above the bottomless abyss of the sky below. The sea of divine flames above made for a spectacular sky. He enjoyed the views for a while, sipping coffee and not thinking about anything in particular. Eventually, though, Sonny grew bored and finally returned to the 5th level of the Ebony Tower. He looked at the runes for a while, eventually stopping near a familiar section of Nether's writings. Out there on the obsidian wall, a strange map had been carved into the stone. The ivory tower, the tomb of Ariel Ravenheart Bastion, the great vessel that served as the citadel for the House of Night, the underworld and Weaver's mask placed above the other 6 landmarks, with a question mark next to it. The other 6 strongholds were only marked by a single rune each. Desire, oblivion, dread, imagination, repose, destiny, and fate. Sonny studied the map with amusement. It had seemed a bit strange before. After all, there were no borders, no terrain, no measure of distance between the strongholds. They all seemed strangely disconnected, as if there was no map at all. Now, of course, Sonny knew the demons had built their citadels in different realms, and so it could as well have been a realm map. It was only after the dream realm had assimilated all mortal realms, and 5 of the 6 divine realms that the demonic strongholds ended up connected by land. Finally, his gaze settled on the carving of Weaver's mask. Nether had not known where his eldest sibling dwelled, or if there was such a place at all. Perhaps Weaver had been a homeless wanderer, just like Sonny. Smiling darkly, Sonny looked away from the map and turned his attention to the runes. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story. And if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be surprise for all of you. Stay tuned.